Kate, thank you very much for your time. And look, just finally, first it was the safety videos and the gun, now the lollies. One person took to Twitter and created quite the stir when he suggested that Air New Zealand dispense with lollies at the end of a plane ride. Freddie Coulthard said, to quote, as one of New Zealand's biggest brands, it would be good to be encouraging clean eating and healthy digestion, and that kids eating sweets is bad for their dental and physical health. And he went on to suggest the prune, the humble prune,
The humble prune is a laxative, and I don't know if we want that as we depart the aircraft.
It's also a very tasty snack, and it happens to be one of my favourite snacks. So,
isn't it supposed to be the boiled sweet? I think is so that you suck, because it's supposed to let your eustachian tube release air pressure as you descend, isn't it?
Yes,
that's
so,
right.
I mean,
it works. It actually works.
Does it really?
Yes.
Do you think?
Yeah, it works for me. I don't. It really helps.
I wouldn't mind if they gave me a piece of chewing gum or something like that, but I've never liked boiled lollies, so
exactly. I hate them. Maybe this is a bit of a bugbear of mine, because I find those boiled sweets even cheap and not very tasty. And when I thought prunes, maybe there is something to having a good healthy snack. Why not a suite of options? Why can't you have, say, carrot sticks, celery sticks, prunes?
Yeah.
Well, I'd be up for something healthier. I don't like boiled lollies either, but just something you can suck on is the key. But if you're worried about it, perhaps one can bring one's own prune or butterscotch or whatever you're into. And if young children are spending that much time on planes that the lollies are affecting them, they're probably going to have some fairly unhealthy things going on for them anyway. If they're on planes that much with one lollies, it's not a daily matter.
So both of you just say to stick with the boiled sweets at the moment.
Well, something healthier would be great, but it needs to be something that you can actually suck on, because that's what helps with the ears.
And on a final note regarding Air New Zealand, because we talked a little bit about safety videos yesterday, do you both watch those safety videos, or, Stephen, do you ignore it?
I'm afraid I've got a relative who's a pilot who said that they are sniggering in the cockpit when they hear the unpopular ones start up, as they hear, I won't say the words that they hear it floating through as passengers are grumbling about having to watch it. I can't stand it. I just think I've done this so often. Can't they just respect that most of us actually know what the message is now?
It's a fair point, Sue.
Well, I think in practice that is what happens. They are not usually escorting people off the plane for refusing to watch the videos. Obviously, this must have been a particularly unfortunate.
Exactly.
Yes, egregious is the word.
Arrogant.
Yeah, arrogant people. Yes.
I'd like to see a revolt one day, though, if they did. I mean, this person, I wouldn't want to be the leader of the revolt, because if they were in the exit row, well, that's really different. But if a whole lot of people just shut their eyes and said, I cannot be patronised like this any longer, it infantilises me, I'm not doing it, I think there'd be a massive cheer.
It Air New Zealand safety videos infantilises people.
Well, they infantilise, and they show you how to. I mean, sure, they show you how to do up the seatbelt. Now, there will be people who don't know. How many?
It's a very good point, Stephen Franks. Next time I see it, I'll try and have a look at that. But you've been a wonderful panel. And I'll tell you what, a lot of feedback coming through.
Good.
So that's been fantastic. Stephen Franks. Sue Bradford, come again.
Oh, kia ora, what else I'd love to.
We'd love to have you back on. You've been great. That's me, back tomorrow. Checkpoint next.
Kei te whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. On tonight's programme, an unexplained death on Auckland's southern motorway leads to complete traffic chaos, with cars at a standstill for hours. The government takes a hammering over its flagship KiwiBuild policy after the minister hedges his bets on the 100,000 homes target. So is it a reset or a renege? Labour MP Kitty Allen speaks of her shame at her brother being charged with murder. A decorated elite SAS soldier is dead after an accident during a military exercise. Why bringing home the bacon's got a whole lot more expensive. And hey, we've got a story about some kid called Archie. You may have heard of him. Check us out on Facebook Live. We're also on Sky TV, Channel 83. RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, ko Susana Leia tawa tēnei. A joint training exercise between the Defence Force and the US military in South Auckland has been suspended after the death of an SAS soldier. 36-year-old Lance Corporal Nicholas Kahotea died after being taken by helicopter from Ardmore to Auckland City Hospital last night. It's the third death during a military exercise in this country this year. The Acting Defence Minister, Winston Peters, has confirmed to reporters that the exercise, which is due to run for 2 more weeks, has been suspended.
We pass on our serious condolences to the family, the wider family as well. At this point in time, it will obviously be the subject of coronial and other inquiries.
The police are investigating the death on the behalf of the coroner, and the Defence Force will also hold a court of inquiry. The police have decided a private investigator did not break the law when he recorded a private meeting of Canterbury earthquake claimants. The controversial surveillance firm Thompson and Clark was hired by Southern Response to monitor the activities of claimants, the Crown Agency accused of threatening its staff. The police have found it did nothing wrong, saying the phone its contractor used for recording was in plain view, and those at the meeting had no right to expect it would be held in private. However, one of those who was there, Peter Glasson, has condemned the inquiry as a whitewash.
Thompson and Clark are all ex-police officers themselves, and they've shown themselves here that the police, simply by not interviewing anyone else, they've shown themselves to, in my view, to be somewhat biased.
The police have declined to comment. One of 2 men acquitted today of raping a woman at a Napier hotel can now be revealed as the serial groper who indecently assaulted 11 women in 2017. It took a jury 7 hours to find Jason Trembath and Joshua Pauling not guilty of raping and sexually violating the woman after a night out. Our Hawke's Bay reporter Anusha Bradley is at the Napier District Court.
The rape case only came to light when the police investigating the groping discovered a photo taken by Trembath of Pauling straddling the woman on a closed Facebook page belonging to Taradale Cricket Club. Trembath pleaded guilty to taking and distributing the photo, and the jury found Pauling guilty of being a party to making an intimate recording. It can now be revealed that in March, Trembath pleaded guilty to 11 charges of indecently assaulting 11 young female joggers on separate occasions in Hawke's Bay and Rotorua in 2017. Both men will be sentenced next month. Ko Anusha Bradley aho.
The Labour MP, Kiri Allen, says her whānau is no different to many others struggling with problems such as drug abuse and violence. It was revealed today that the MP's older brother, Eric Mete, has been charged with murdering his partner. Lee Marama McLaughlin reports.
Name suppression was lifted for 50-year-old Eric Mete when he appeared in the High Court in Wanganui today. He's charged with killing 41-year-old Lorna Ann Thompson, whose body was found in an apartment in the city last month. The police believe she was killed at least 4 days before being found. Ms Allen has spoken about how devastated the whānau is and how their sympathies are with the victims' whānau. She's told reporters methamphetamine is a big problem in her whānau, and this case exposes what many families are dealing with behind closed doors. Ko Lee Marama McLaughlin tēnei.
The Housing Minister, Phil Twyford, says he has no intention of resigning. The National Party is calling on him to be sacked or stepped down, saying he has failed to deliver on Kiwi Build. Mr Twyford is refusing to guarantee that the 10-year target of building 100,000 homes is still valid. Having previously staked his job as Housing Minister on delivering 100,000 homes, he was asked today if he intends to resign.
No, I'm totally focused on the reset, getting that right, taking a package to Cabinet in June. And look, I'm also really proud of what we've achieved. We've got a big, bold housing program. Kiwi Build's only a small part of it.
The Housing Minister, Phil Twyford. Relations between the White House and Congress have deteriorated further after a day of drama in Washington. The Democrat-led House Judicial Committee has voted to hold the Attorney General William Barr in contempt for failing to release an unredacted copy of the Mueller report on Russian interference in the 2016 elections. The committee's chairperson, Gerald Nadler, says the United States is in a constitutional crisis.
Attorney General Barr, having proved himself to be the personal attorney to President Trump rather than the Attorney General of the United States, by misleading the public as to the contents of the Mueller report twice, by not being truthful with Congress.
A vote will now be taken by the full House of Representatives. 3 government ministers and a Labour MP were gifted rugby union and league tickets by Huawei during the past year. The gifts are declared in the latest register detailing MPs' personal interests up to the end of January. The Police Minister Stuart Nash, the Corrections Minister Calvin Davis and backbencher Kiri Allen all declared that Huawei gave them tickets to All Blacks matches. The Māori Development Minister Nanaia Mahuta was given tickets to a Warriors game. Both Ms Allen and Ms Mahuta say the matches took place before Huawei hit the headlines over its bid to provide 5G technology for Spark. It's coming up to 5:06. An emotional Maurizio Pochettino has paid tribute to his Tottenham Hotspur heroes for pulling off a Champions League miracle by beating Ajax to set up a final against Liverpool. Spurs were seemingly down and out at half-time of their semi-final second leg in Amsterdam, trailing 3-0 on aggregate. But Lucas Moura completed a memorable second-half hat-trick, with his third goal coming deep into stoppage time to send Spurs through to their first Champions League final.
My player, they are heroes. I am so emotional now, and thank you our fans. So, thank you the people that believe in us from the beginning of the season to achieve this amazing moment, and I think it's fantastic.
Tottenham coach Maurizio Pochettino. The last All-England final was in 2008 when Manchester United beat Chelsea. Tonga is set to offer Israel Folau a spot in its national rugby side if Australia no longer wants him. The former Wallaby and Tongan coach Todai Kefu says Folau, whose parents are Tongan, will be welcome in his team. Folau is waiting to find out just what penalty will be imposed by Rugby Australia now that an independent panel has found him guilty of a high-level breach of his contract for his controversial social media posts. Kefu says the 30-year-old could go and play in Europe if he's exiled from Australia Rugby and then play for Tonga at the 2023 World Cup. That's the news.
Will they make it? There's actually a whole range of options. Some of those require new technologies coming on stream during the next 30 years. Will they build it?
And the real problem with Kiwi Build from the get-go is it was substitutive, not additive.
Will they cut it?
Too early to tell. Moving now is the best choice for us as far as we consider, because it means we get ahead of the curve.
Get ahead of the curve with Morning Report with Corin Dan and Susie Ferguson, weekdays from 6.
Then on 9 to noon, a new survey suggests we are putting too much trust in smart technology. And after 10, out of the mouths of babes, Kiwi mezzo-soprano Anna Perard on how exposure to opera can improve children's chances. Join me, Catherine Ryan, on 9 to noon after Morning Report on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Northland through to Wellington, including Taumaranui and Taihape. Rain developing this evening or overnight, briefly heavy, clearing tomorrow morning and fine spells increasing. Coromandel, Bay of Plenty and Taupo, cloudy periods and isolated showers. Rain for a time tomorrow morning or early afternoon, then mainly fine. Gisborne to Wairarapa, scattered rain tonight or tomorrow morning. Nelson and Marlborough, scattered showers turning to rain this evening. Brief heavy falls, clearing early tomorrow and becoming fine. Bulla and Westland, rain today with heavy falls and possible thunderstorms, fine spells and isolated showers tomorrow. Fiordland, cloudy periods and a few showers. Canterbury, Otago and Southland, high cloud with scattered rain mostly in the west. Mainly fine tomorrow with areas of fog morning and night. Chatham Islands, often cloudy with showers tomorrow. It's coming up to 9 minutes past 5. You're with RNZ National.
Thank you, Susanna. This is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. Mystery surrounds the death of a man on Auckland's southern motorway today. The police say he fell from a moving vehicle in the northbound lane, but they won't say whether he was the sole occupant of the van he was in. All 4 northbound lanes of State Highway 1 at Ellerslie were closed for almost 2 hours in the middle of the day, causing traffic chaos. Alex Perrottet reports.
An eerie sight. No traffic on half of one of Auckland's busiest stretches of road. Instead, the lanes filled with police and traffic control trucks. Police say the man fell from the vehicle while it was moving at high speed. The police's Eagle helicopter landed on the motorway twice to provide immediate first aid, but medics could not save the man. Police blocked the northbound lanes and set up a cordon before 12 p.m, but an hour later the body was still laying in the middle lane, covered by a white sheet. He was eventually moved into the back of a grey van. A tow truck then took away a white Hyundai IMAX van that had come to a stop in the inside lane. Police have just removed the body from the motorway here at State Highway 1 at Ellerslie. They had been working very hard with road workers to clear the crash site before they could reopen the 4 northbound lanes that were closed for a good or almost 2 hours around lunchtime here today. Even the southbound traffic had slowed as onlookers surveyed the site, causing chaos on the motorway as well as the surrounding areas. St John Ambulance said another person was also treated and they were in a moderate condition, though didn't need to go to hospital. Police say the serious crash unit is investigating. In Ellerslie, for Checkpoint, Alex Perrottet.
And if you're just listening to that item and like to look at it, the package will go up on our website and our Facebook page. The SAS soldier who has died after an accident during a training exercise at a South Auckland military base yesterday was a decorated Afghanistan veteran. The Defence Force says that Lance Corporal Nicholas Kahotea will be remembered as a professional soldier, a father and friend to many. The joint training exercise with the US Army has been suspended as the police, Defence Force and WorkSafe investigate what happened. Matthew Tunison reports.
The Army Chief, Major General John Boswell, says 36-year-old Nicholas Kahotea was a consummate professional, outstanding soldier and top bloke who was known for his dedication and reliability. He joined the Army in 2006 and became an SAS officer 8 years later after going through the rigorous training program. He served in Afghanistan and was decorated 4 times. He was taken by helicopter to Auckland City Hospital last night, but was later pronounced dead. The large-scale training exercise with the US military was supposed to continue until May the 23rd. The Acting Defence Minister, Winston Peters, spoke to reporters this afternoon.
We pass on our serious condolences to the family, the wider family as well. At this point in time, it will obviously be the subject of coronial and other inquiries. I can't say much more than that.
Can you confirm that the exercise has been suspended?
Yes, I can.
Can you confirm whether it was part of the joint military exercise?
No, I can't confirm that at this point in time. But, I mean, to be honest with you, it probably was, yes.
Details of the incident which led to Lance Corporal Kahotea's death are unclear. Auckland resident Andy Brotherston saw a very large military-style helicopter landing on the field at Auckland Domain, a few hundred metres from Auckland Hospital, at about 8:15 last night. It was met by an ambulance. Ms Brotherston says she often sees the police Eagle helicopter and the Westpac rescue helicopter landing at the hospital, and she's sure it was neither of those.
There was this huge black helicopter that was making a lot more noise than the Eagle was. It actually circled round and landed on the rugby field right in the middle of the Domain beside Auckland Hospital.
A second chopper, which Ms Brotherston says also looked like a Black Hawk military helicopter, circled overhead.
There was a St John ambulance parked right near the rugby field, looking like it was waiting. And I just assumed there'd been some sort of military incident and this big Black Hawk was dropping a patient off.
Auckland Hospital would not comment on the incident, but says large helicopters cannot land on its helipad, and it has an arrangement with the Defence Force about landing larger choppers. Lance Corporal Kahotea's death is the third to occur during military training exercises this year. 23-year-old Zachary Christopher Yarwood died after an incident during an advanced diving course in Devonport in March. Singaporean soldier Aloysius Pang was crushed between the barrel of an artillery gun and the cabin he was in during a training exercise at Waiuru in January. Former SAS soldier David Maloney says there are inevitably risks during military training exercises, but it's crucial for soldiers to be exposed to the sorts of conditions they may face during combat or other high-pressure situations.
They will get placed in positions where it will be quite dangerous, and you need to be able to react quickly and effectively. You know, if you haven't been shot at before, it may be difficult for you. It's to make it realistic as possible, so you'll be as effective as possible when it happens.
Mr Maloney says the tragedy will have hit Lance Corporal Kahotea's fellow troops hard. In Auckland for Checkpoint, Matthew Tunison.
Labour MP Kitty Allen says her whānau is devastated and ashamed that her brother has been charged with the murder of his partner in Wanganui. Interim name suppression lapsed for the 50-year-old labourer Eric Mete today, who appeared in the High Court in Wanganui. Lee Marama McLaughlin was there.
Kitty Allen didn't attend the packed public gallery this morning when her older brother Eric Mete took to the dock. The first-term Labour MP instead holding a press conference in Wellington.
So good morning. As you'll all be aware, my eldest brother has been charged in connection with the death of a Whanganui woman and appears in the Whanganui High Court today. As you can probably anticipate, it's been an extremely trying time for our whānau. And our thoughts and all of our aroha have been with the victim and her whānau at this time.
Eric Mete was charged with murder almost a month ago after police found the body of 41-year-old Lorna Ann Thompson in a rundown building in Whanganui following a tip-off. Police believe the mother of four was killed at least 4 days before she was found in April. Today, the public gallery was packed with wānau and supporters from both the victim and accused who stood together outside the court. Ms Thompson is known to be Eric Mete's partner, but Ms Allen only confirmed family ties.
Yes, this has a big impact, a devastating impact, and like I said at the outset, between my own whānau and the victim's whānau, there are generations of relationships between both of us. That's in the past and also currently. So I guess what I'm particularly mindful of is our younger people that are involved, and I'm mindful of the way that we as families, and particularly my family, manage the harm that has been caused.
Her brother wore jeans, a black denim jacket and a T-shirt when he appeared before Justice Simon France, who was on video link. An assessment will be carried out to determine whether the accused is fit to stand trial. Ms Allen is one of 10 siblings and says while she did not grow up with Eric Mete, he's wānau.
With regards to these types of circumstances, I'm an auntie, I'm a sister, I'm a daughter, and that's been really important for me over the last couple of weeks to put that role at the forefront of my mind and be very clear that it's in a separate and distinct category as my role as a parliamentarian. That said, I know that this being a parliamentarian attracts additional attention.
Kitty Allen also spoke about methamphetamine, or P, and how it's had a devastating impact on her wānau and her communities, and these experiences drove her to politics.
So the things that I witness within my own family, I often talk about it as being the things that happen in the shadows. Methamphetamine is currently one of those drugs where the harms occur in the shadows. And so, for me, the things that have occurred in my own whānau highlight or bring home the realities of what's happening for many whānau within my community.
Eric Mete has been remanded in custody until July, when he's expected to enter a plea. In Whanganui for Checkpoint, I'm Lee Marama McLaughlin.
And you can watch Lee Marama's piece online. It will go up on our Facebook page and website. It is about 18 minutes after 5 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. As always, we would love to hear from you. You can text us on 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Another tough week in Parliament over KiwiBuild. The National Party is calling on the Housing Minister to resign. Last week, Phil Twyford was under pressure over the Crown underwrite process. Now he's facing persistent questions about whether he will stick to the long-held target of building 100,000 KiwiBuild homes in 10 years, a promise he's staked his job on. So far, just 80 homes have been built. Ministers are starting to lay the groundwork for a target reduction, suggesting the housing market is quite different from when the original target was set. Here's our political editor, Jane Patterson.
Renee Heisteck has bought a KiwiBuild home in Wanaka. She'd be disappointed if others didn't get the same chance as her family to settle down.
We don't have to move. We have a dog, we have kids. We don't have to shift every year at the whim of the landlords, so it's really quite wonderful. The very cold, wet, damp 1960s built house that we were in before, they tried to raise the rent $75 each time.
But economist Shamabeel Jacob says in its current form, KiwiBuild won't fundamentally change the market because the houses are too expensive and first home buyers don't have the money.
I'm not optimistic that we will see a big reset, but I think we need a fundamental repositioning of KiwiBuild if it's to succeed. In its current form, it is doomed to fail.
He says the government should consider renting the houses out instead.
KiwiBuild must be focused on building additional homes that the private sector can't and won't provide. and that is very much around housing for poorer people and people who are renting and under stress.
Back at Parliament, Housing Minister Phil Twyford once again faced off against the National MP Judith Collins.
Does the government continue to pledge to build 100,000 affordable homes over the next 10 years through its Kiwi Build program, as stated in the speech from the throne?
The Honourable Phil Twyford. Thank you, Mr Speaker. There has been no change to the pledge since the speech from the throne. As I said yesterday, Cabinet will consider the Kiwi Build reset in June, and it's inappropriate for me to speculate on what Cabinet may or may not decide. What has changed is that the housing market and the program need to respond.
Ms Collins then asked Phil Twyford whether he should keep his job.
Does the Minister stand by his statement to media last year, when questioned on the design of the Kiwi Build program, that he offered to, quote, stake his job, end quote, on its success? And if he does, then has he offered his resignation to the Prime Minister yet?
I have not, because I'm utterly focused on getting the reset of Kiwi Build right.
The Deputy Prime Minister Winston Peters, however, was happy to state the government would reach its target and more.
Sometimes getting things started is not easy, especially when you've got 9 years of absolute paralysis and neglect. And it was never going to be easy, but I'm very confident we'll do a whole lot better over the next 10 years with this sort of drive and impetus and commitment than 100,000 homes.
Phil Twyford was asked what he thought of Mr Peters' optimistic view of the Kiwi Build targets.
I like the way the Deputy Prime Minister rolls. I like his gung-ho support for our housing policies.
Phil Twyford will welcome any support he can get from senior ministers over Kiwi Build, with the opposition now sensing it's got him on the ropes over Labour's flagship policy. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Jane Patterson.
China expert Anne-Marie Brady says she's still being subjected to ongoing harassment, including having her mail tampered with at the University of Canterbury. A police investigation came to a halt in February after the prominent China critic reported a burglary and other incidents, with the police saying those matters were unresolved and there were no further lines of inquiry. She's previously said her office was broken into twice, her house burgled, her car tampered with, and she has received a threatening letter after she published a paper on the influence of the Chinese Communist Party in the Pacific. Professor Brady appeared before Parliament's Justice Committee this morning as part of its inquiry into general and local elections. She's calling for the government to better support the Chinese community in New Zealand and boost the resources of the SIS to help guard against foreign interference. Afterwards, she also told reporters what she described as harassment was continuing.
Recently, I've had mail that's been tampered with in my university mailbox, and then I've had my banking materials stolen, not only of the university mailbox, but my letterbox as well, which seems an unusual coincidence. The police are investigating that, plus we continue to get anonymous calls to our unlisted phone number.
Given that the police couldn't find evidence the last time, how confident are you they can actually do anything this time?
They did find evidence.
Mount a case.
They did find evidence. This is not like mounting a case. It's a bit different from your usual kind of criminal situation. This is where a government has to decide if it's willing to confront another government.
Do you think that the government needs to speak on your behalf to the Chinese government?
The government needs to protect me and my family. We will continue to be harassed, and there'll be attempts to intimidate and harass me because I'm just doing my job. I'm doing what I was employed to do by the University of Canterbury 18 years ago, to research and teach Chinese politics, and that's what I do. So I'll continue to do what I do. But China has changed. China under Xi Jinping has changed. And so just being a China specialist who understands about the Chinese Communist Party and writes about the things I do, then I am being targeted. And this is not about me. This is about New Zealand's relationship with China and about our ability to protect our citizens.
Do you think that the government just still isn't taking it seriously enough?
They are taking it very seriously, I know that.
The issue of foreign interference, though?
Well, it seemed rather difficult today in the committee, and it's been quite a difficult process, but actually it's amazing progress that we've got from September 2017, when I made the agonising decision to release what was a conference paper in the public domain because I felt that it was in public interest, and I knew I was putting myself at risk when I did that. To where we are now, that today we could have a respectful conversation. What Tatipini O'Regan talks about civil society, we had civil society today. We had a civil exchange of the different perspectives around the table, talking openly about this very sensitive topic. So I'm hugely hopeful, actually, that our people are going to come up with the right way to address this issue.
And that was Anne-Marie Brady speaking to reporters at Parliament. In a statement, the police say the investigation into Ms Brady's claims remains open and is unresolved at this time. Social media has been sent into a frenzy following the announcement of the Duke and Duchess of Sussex's son, Archie Harrison Mountbatten Windsor. Some are associating the newborn's first name with famous American pop culture figures, while others are drawing attention to the child's last name, Mountbatten Windsor, a combination of the name of the royal house and Prince Philip's family name. The prince was never allowed to call any of his own children Mountbatten. To continue Checkpoint's in-depth coverage of the royal birth, here's our very own Royals reporter, Logan Church.
There were bright smiles all around as Prince Harry and Meghan Markle showed off their newborn son to the world, Archie Harrison Mountbatten Windsor.
It's pretty amazing, and I mean, I have the two best guys in the world, so I'm really happy.
The couple described their experience as parents so far as magic.
His looks are changing every single day,
Yeah.
So who knows? It's only been, 2.5 days, 3 days?
Yeah.
But we're just so thrilled to have our own little bundle of joy and be able to spend some precious times with him as he slowly starts to grow up.
The couple also released official photos of the baby, including a picture of Archie meeting the Queen and Prince Philip, accompanied by the Duke and Duchess of Sussex and Meghan's mother, Doria Ragland. Could we see the baby in the photo? No, as he was completely covered in cloth. But that didn't stop royal fans outside Buckingham Palace gushing when they saw the pictures.
Very proud to be British at this moment, to see a new addition to the royal family.
Oh, cute!
Oh, that's a cute little baby.
Look at, oh, they look great together.
They do.
What a nice family. Just brings me back to when we had our baby. Yeah, I know they're going to be great parents.
Oh, it's precious. I love the nose.
But it wouldn't be a royal event without some controversy. Archie is not a traditional royal name, and in this case is not short for Archibald. While no explanation for the name choice has come, social media has been quick to fill in the blanks, with some suggesting links to red-headed cartoon character Archie Andrews of the Archie comics, which have now been adapted to the TV series Riverdale.
Can I sit, Jughead? If you want.
The Archie Comics Twitter account simply posted "I'm baby" moments after the name was revealed. But it's not just the first name that's getting attention. The new royal's middle name, Harrison, was originally used as a surname, meaning the son of Harry. And royal fans are also pointing to the last name, Mountbatten Windsor. The Queen decreed in 1952 that her children would carry her family name Windsor, much to the dismay of her husband Prince Philip, whose family name was Mountbatten.
The name has to be Windsor, for stability.
Even though Archie is not the first royal child to use the hyphenated name, some are saying this is a nice nod to the boy's great-grandfather. Even the big reveal of the baby has caused some to pause. A simple easel announcing the birth was placed outside Buckingham Palace earlier this week, and there was no big baby display shortly after the birth, as seen with recent royal arrivals. But the founder of the British Monarchist Society, Thomas Mace Archer-Mills, explains this is just a return to tradition.
This is reverting back to the way royal births have always been displayed, an easel and a simple statement. And this goes back to when the Queen was born. It was always great to see young royals as a baby, but that never came literally 2.5 hours after the baby was born. It just wasn't done back then. So the Duke and Duchess of Sussex have not rewritten history. They have not done anything different. It's not what royal commentators have expected. It's not what the public has wanted. So they've created a bit of animosity with the reveal of this baby.
Animosity or not, one thing is for sure. This little baby boy has a big future in front of him. For Checkpoint, Logan Church.
A must watch, and that will be available on our Facebook page. You can review it second by second. And coming up on Checkpoint on RNZ National, the government goes on a charm offensive in Taranaki, painting a bright future for the region despite putting the handbrake on new offshore oil and gas exploration permits. Have you noticed the Sunday bacon sizzle-ups got more expensive? We'll explain why. And we get an early glimpse at Te Papa's newest permanent exhibition ahead of its opening this weekend. Get in touch about anything you've heard on the program so far. You can text us on 2101, tweet at CheckpointRNZ, or email us checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. But here's Susanna with the headlines.
A joint training exercise involving the Defence Force and the United States military in Auckland has been suspended after the death of an SAS soldier. 36-year-old Lance Corporal Nicholas Kahotea died after being taken by helicopter from Ardmore to Auckland City Hospital last night. The Acting Defence Minister Winston Peters has confirmed that the military exercise, due to run for 2 more weeks, has been suspended. The Labour MP, Kiri Allen, says her whānau is no different to many others who struggle with problems such as drug abuse and violence. Her comments follow revelations that Ms Allen's older brother, Eric Mete, is facing murder charges for the death of his partner, 41-year-old Lorna Ann Thompson. Kiri Allen has told reporters that methamphetamine has devastated her whānau and communities, and she's in politics to make a difference. The police have decided a private investigator did not break the law when he recorded a private meeting of Canterbury earthquake claimants. The controversial surveillance firm Thompson and Clark was hired by Southern Response to monitor the activities of claimants it thought were threatening its staff. One of those at the meeting, Peter Glasson, says the police inquiry was a whitewash as Thompson and Clark staff are former police officers. Traffic chaos came to Auckland's southern motorway today after a fatal accident. The police say a man fell from a moving van and died at the scene despite the police helicopter landing on the motorway to provide first aid. Northbound lanes were closed for 2 hours. 2 men have been acquitted of raping and sexually violating a woman at a Napier hotel in 2017 after a night out. A jury in the Napier District Court deliberated for 7 hours before finding Jason Trembath and Joshua Pauling not guilty. It can now be revealed that Trembath was the serial groper convicted of indecently assaulting 11 women in 2017. Those are the headlines. Our next news and weather update is at 6.
Thanks, Susanna. This is Checkpoint. Time now to get Nona Peltier to tell us what's been happening in business. So Nona, Rural Services Company, this is PGG Wrightson. That's the right number of Gs, I think.
That's the right number of Gs.
It's going to give its shareholders a $235 million windfall. Where's that coming from?
Well, it's actually coming from the proceeds of the sale of their seeds business. They sold their seeds business. Well, I guess the sale was completed this year. They sold it to a Dutch firm, DLF Seeds, for $434 million, and they put that money in the bank, and they're going to use some of it to restructure their debt, plan some other things, and then what's left over after that, they're going to return to their shareholders for about 31 cents a share. Now, it's going to be scaled, so depending, I guess, on how much that works out to per shareholder. But anyways, it's quite a lot of money. This is one of the things that the company said they were probably going to do. Today, they also announced, though, that their outlook for this financial year is going to be at the lower end of expectations, and that's because of some of the troubles that there's been in the rural sector, some downturn and so on. But because of the official cash rate drop that the Reserve Bank has handed out yesterday, they expect that to flow through to farmers in the form of lower interest rates on their loans.
Now, Tax Freedom Day today. Should we get excited about it? What does it mean, Tax Freedom Day?
It's just a bit of fun with numbers, really. But it does say something. And what it says is that when we look at our gross domestic product, that's the size of our economy, part of that is taxes. So how long does it take for us to pay that part of the economy down? All of us all together, all of us taxpayers? It's today. It would have taken us all of today, up to today, from this to pay that amount. And so we've done it. And now all the rest of the money that, in theory, is really for us to say that's not taxes. So it depends, of course, on how much money you make to begin with. But it is just fun with numbers. And what's interesting about it, if you wanted to mark how well we're doing, we could say that Tax Freedom Day has come one day later this year than last year.
Right.
But 5 days. 1 day sooner than last year, but 5 days later than it was in the last few years.
So we're 1 day ahead, basically.
We're 1 day ahead. It doesn't really make much difference in the end because we all have to pay our taxes, don't we? Yes.
And what else has been going on in the markets?
Well, because of the official cash rate drop that we had yesterday, our local economy is doing quite well relative to the rest of the world, which has got the jitters over the trade talks, how that's going to turn out between China and the United States. But we rose 41 points, that's 0.4% today, to a new record, 10,104 on the top 50 index. So that's quite a toppy number. And our dollar, it did drop yesterday as a result of that change to the interest rate. So we're still, though, we recovered almost everything, holding steady today at 65.7 US cents, 94.2 Australian, where we've been for a very long time, more or less, and 50.5 pence.
Okay. Thanks, Nona. Appreciate it. Nona Peltier with our business news there. Now, there are more problems on Auckland's southern motorway. Police are attending a serious crash on the southbound lanes of the southern motorway near the Market Road overbridge. Now, apparently occurred at about 4:45 p.m. and was between a truck and a motorcycle. The motorcyclist has been seriously injured and is being transported to hospital. And at this stage, 2 southbound lanes are currently open, but the police say it's likely that further lanes will be closed. Now, they're advising commuters to avoid the area if at all possible. The government went on the full charm offensive in Taranaki today as it sought to paint a bright future for the region. Now it's stopped issuing new offshore oil and gas exploration permits. The Prime Minister today announced a $27 million clean energy centre will be set up in the province and a further $20 million set aside in the budget for a new energy research fund. And Hollywood director James Cameron chipped in too with his own thoughts on what New Zealanders could do to move to a cleaner, greener future. Our Taranaki Whanganui reporter Robin Martin has more.
Jacinda Ardern made the announcement in front of about 500 delegates at a glitzy Just Transition Summit in New Plymouth. It's designed to pave the way forward for Taranaki, which also likes to be known as the Energy Province. The Prime Minister had at least 3 cabinet colleagues in tow, and presenters at the summit include Hollywood A-listers and Australian rock royalty. Ms Ardern says the country needs a focused agency to help it transition away from fossil fuels, and the National New Energy Development Centre would fill that role.
It's really a centrepiece, a hub that's bringing together new innovative technologies, that's helping our commercial sector to transition, that's finding new technology solutions for consumers. This will be a hub for innovation and for us to really develop those alternatives.
Ms Ardern says the centre will directly employ about 45 people and will help to create new businesses and jobs by developing new technologies.
The goal has to be, how do we turn those oil and gas jobs into jobs in hydrogen, jobs in wind energy, jobs in tidal. And so what we're doing here is trying to commercialise some of those new opportunities and make sure we keep those high-wage jobs.
The chair of the Taranaki Mayoral Forum, Neil Holdham, described the exploration ban as a kick in the guts for the province last year. He's feeling a bit more upbeat now.
It's a really good start, and it's really good to hear the Prime Minister talking about building a partnership and wanting to, support us as we look to maintain the standard of living of the people that live here, which is fundamentally what this is about.
Mr Holdham says 30 years of hard work now lies ahead if a just transition is to become a reality. In downtown New Plymouth, views about the value of the new energy centre were mixed.
If they wanted to go down this line, that should have already been set up years ago. Yeah, go for it.
45 jobs is not very many, is it, in my opinion? I don't really believe the technology is really good enough yet to transition.
I'm all for it. I mean, I work in oil and gas at present, and I'm looking to see what the future holds.
Oh, I mean, at the end of the day, it's probably going to head in that direction anyway.
I'm sure there's ways that they could still work within oil and gas, and, you know, that still be an option, you know.
Meanwhile, back at the summit, Avatar filmmaker and organic farmer James Cameron delivered his own view on New Zealand's emissions problems.
By far, the biggest section of emissions at 48% is agriculture, and animal agriculture is the vast majority of that. Dairy alone accounts for 22%, which is well above all transportation combined. So the elephant in the room here, or the cow in the room here, is obviously animal agriculture.
Part of Mr. Cameron's solution, moving to a vegan or vegetarian diet. Back in the city centre, enthusiasm for that idea varied too.
Not a good idea. Growing up with it, going through life with it, there's no way I'm going to stop eating meat.
I have gone vegetarian before and I felt way better for it.
I do enjoy a good steak and a bacon, eggs and that kind of thing.
Vegetarian meal a day is not going to do anyone any harm.
Yes, we're reducing meat as much as we feel able to.
Plant-based diets, soya actually does more damage to the earth than cattle does.
But the Prime Minister didn't think she'd be turning vegan anytime soon.
I'm from the Waikato. I don't know that I'd be allowed to go home if I ever became vegan, and I love cheese.
The Just Transition Summit continues tomorrow. I ngā mutu mo te hōtaka o te Ahi Pone, ko Robin Martin aho.
The police will not be charging Thompson and Clark over eavesdropping on a group of Quake claimants. The State Services Commission last year blasted government agencies, including Claims Resolution Service Southern Response, for their inappropriate use of the private investigators, ordering the police to look into whether the claimants had been illegally spied on. The snooping concerned a 2014 meeting of claimants looking at their legal options. Southern Response hired Thompson and Clark, which sent along an unlicensed investigator to record it on his phone and report back on what was said. After initially forgetting to carry out the inquiry, the police today revealed Thompson and Clark had done nothing illegal. They say the man's phone was in plain sight and the claimants had no right to expect the meeting would be held in private. One of those there, Peter Glasson, told Conan Young it was made clear this was not a public meeting.
The public were invited. It was claimants or Southern Response who were invited to the meeting. And then at the beginning of the meeting, it was emphasised again that the meeting was for Southern Response claimants. It wasn't for any other people, including Southern Response representatives, their contractors, or those sorts of other parties.
Did you suspect that there might be some Southern Response representatives there? Were you worried about that?
No, we're quite naive about that. Didn't expect that sort of thing to happen. And it's not the sort of thing we expect to happen in a country like New Zealand. And
why were you wanting to have this meeting confined to Southern Response claimants only?
Basically because there was issues that were being discussed in terms of what actions should be taken in terms of legal action. There was a solicitor there representing or wishing to discuss the sorts of legal action that we could progress, and that was a private matter, not something for Southern Response to be involved in.
And quite serious, I suppose, as well. If Southern Response was able to hear what was being said, that would put you guys at a disadvantage, wouldn't it?
Absolutely, and that was clearly, in hindsight, that was the real reason why Thompson and Clark was employed by Southern Response to attend the meeting.
Now, the State Services Commission found that Southern Response had sent an unlicensed private investigator along to this meeting and that the meeting was recorded, and they sent this off, the State Services Commission sent this off to the police saying there may be potentially illegal activity here, and now we've had the end of this investigation by the police, an investigation actually that the police forgot to carry out at one stage. And then they finally remembered to do it, and now they've done it. What do you make of their findings?
Well, I think overall, I don't think any of us who were involved and spied upon by Southern Response and Thompson and Clark had any expectation that the police investigation so-called investigation would have any other sort of outcome other than what it has. We fully expected this kind of what I call a cover-up or a whitewash of their so-called investigation.
What would you have liked to have seen from the police?
I think we would have all liked to have seen a proper legal investigation, and probably from someone independent of the police.
Why was it important, do you think, to have this done independent of the police? Why would they have done a better job?
Well, Thompson and Clark are all ex-police officers themselves, and they've shown themselves here that the police, simply by not interviewing anyone else, they've shown themselves to, in my view, to be somewhat biased.
At the time, Southern Response said it needed to surveil Southern Response claimants because it was worried about threats against its staff. What do you make of those claims from Southern Response?
If you go back to the dates of the meetings, the meetings were held prior to the Ashburton shooting, not after it. And so that has been wound up and used as an excuse by Southern Response. But if you carefully look at the dates, that doesn't hold water, that argument at all.
Peter Glasson talking to our reporter Conan Young, and the police have declined to be interviewed. The mother of a man who died after a hit and run in Christchurch last year says she wants his story to be told as a lesson to other drivers. 56-year-old Timaima Tuilawa was sentenced to community work and had her licence revoked today after she struck Stephen Lowe last July near the Avon River. Our reporter Katie Todd, who was at her sentencing, joined us live from the scene. I asked her what happened on July 5 last year.
Now, Stefan Pierce Lowe was walking his two dogs at about 2:30 in the morning on July 5th, and he was in this area here, right by the Avon River. Now, he was struck by a car travelling in this direction, and the car continued on without stopping. He was seriously injured, and it wasn't until a mother and a daughter came past and saw him and helped out that he received medical attention. And so he was taken to hospital and died the following day in the ICU, surrounded by his family. Now, some of the details are still relatively hazy, and this is because it was a hit and run and the offender was not found until 2 days later. The reason she was found is because a wing mirror from her car fell off when she struck Stefan, and so it was an eagle-eyed police officer that actually saw a car up a driveway missing a wing mirror a couple of kilometres away and investigated, and that's how she became arrested.
Wow, that is, well, particularly eagle-eyed, as you say. Now, you were in court for the sentencing today. What happened then?
Yeah, so the important thing to note about the sentencing, and it's quite an interesting one, is that she wasn't being sentenced for causing Stefan's death, but in fact for not stopping her car to check whether he was okay. So that was a point that the judge made quite clearly today. We heard 4 victim impact statements from Stefan's family. They described him as a vibrant man who was full of compassion and kindness, and talked about how he was an organ donor, and after he died his organs were used to help 8 people, including saving the life of a baby girl. And his mum mentioned, as you said earlier, that his story needs to be told so other drivers know their responsibility to stop and check if someone is okay if they hit them.
And so what did the judge have to say in this?
Now, he took into account that Mrs. Tuilawa was regretful and had battled with poor mental health following the incident last year. It was also her first offence, and she did enter a guilty plea, but he said he struggled to understand why she didn't stop in the first place, or at least turn around her car and point the headlights at what she'd hit, even if it wasn't a person, just to check. Or he mentioned that she could have called emergency services when she got home, which she also didn't do. So he imposed a fine of $500 emotional harm reparation to pay to the family. and she will also be completing 170 hours of community service and has lost her licence for a year.
Katie, did we hear anything from her through her lawyer or anyone as to why she didn't stop on that night?
Now, we understand she thought she had hit a dog rather than a person. That has been her defence the way through.
And that's our Christchurch reporter, Katie Todd. It is about 11 minutes away from 6. I'm Lisa Owen and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Do get in touch about anything you've heard on the program today. You can text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. US President Donald Trump has defended his Attorney General William Barr amid moves to hold him in contempt of Congress. Earlier, the Judiciary Committee of the US House of Representatives recommended that Mr. Barr be held in contempt over his refusal to hand over the uncensored version of the Mueller report on Russian interference in US elections. All 24 Democrats on the committee supported the move, while the 16 Republicans voted against. President Trump says the vote was a stunt and a waste of time. The CNN's Phil Mattingly reports.
House Democrats making their most aggressive move yet to push back against the White House.
This is not a step we take lightly.
In a clear escalation of weeks of intensifying battles,
the ayes have it.
The House Judiciary Committee voting along party lines to hold Attorney General Bill Barr in contempt for not complying with their subpoena for Special Counsel Robert Mueller's full, unredacted Russia report and its underlying evidence.
This is unprecedented. If allowed to go unchecked, this obstruction means the end of congressional oversight. As a co-equal branch of government, we should not and cannot allow this to continue.
Republicans decrying the panel's chairman, Gerald Nadler's decision to decline an opportunity to read a less redacted version of the report and jumping to Barr's defense.
Their angry our nation's chief law enforcement officer and his deputy had the audacity to decide the evidence didn't support charges for obstruction and investigation into something the president didn't do.
The vote coming just hours after the president asserted executive privilege over the materials the committee demanded. The Justice Department telling Nadler that he made, quote, the assertion necessary by moving ahead with the contempt vote.
The administration has announced loud and clear that it does not recognize Congress as a co-equal branch of government with independent constitutional oversight authority, and it will continue to wage its campaign of obstruction.
Last-ditch negotiations between the Justice Department and the committee to ameliorate the growing crisis completely fell apart Tuesday night, prompting Barr in a letter to Trump to urge the president to make a protective assertion of executive privilege. At the hearing, committee members taking turns deploying rhetorical broadsides.
I can only conclude that the president now seeks to take a wrecking ball through the Constitution of the United States of America.
And what does this committee do about the abuses, the attempted coup? It comes in and decides we're going to go after the Attorney General who's trying to clean up the mess.
If it weren't for him being president, he'd be in prison with Michael Cohen today as individual one.
With a singular issue looming throughout the tense hours-long meeting. When and whether the committee will be able to hear from Special Counsel Robert Mueller himself.
We're going to get to ask the guy who wrote the whole darn document. We're all going to get asked him questions. Why don't you hold off on this contempt until at least the guy who wrote the thing spent 22 months and $35 million with a whole bunch of Democrat lawyers putting it together? Why don't you wait and ask him next week before we do this contempt resolution?
Because it would be useful to read the material before we have him in front of us.
Phil Mattingly reporting. Scientists using drone technology have completed a comprehensive survey of the highly contaminated Red Forest located beside the devastated Chernobyl nuclear power plant in Ukraine. The area has been subject to an exclusion zone since 1986, but increasing numbers of tourists are entering it. The BBC's Jonathan Amos reports.
Auto in 3, 2, 1.
Up and away, a drone from the UK's National Centre for Nuclear Robotics heads out on another mission to map Chernobyl's infamous Red Forest. Sited just to the west of the power station, the forest bore the brunt of the fallout from the explosion and fire that engulfed reactor number 4. Radiation killed countless trees, turning them orange. The forest remains one of the most radioactive places on Earth. But Professor Tom Scott from Bristol University says knowledge on the locations of greatest hazard is not precise.
They buried whole villages, and they did it quickly, and they also buried a lot of the equipment that they used for the cleanup, and they did that quickly too. So there are these strange mounds and trenches dotted around the place that don't have good records for what's in them. Part of what we were doing is using the robots to survey those areas to show which ones would essentially have the high hazard materials inside of them.
But there are other places within the exclusion zone where the radiation dangers are greatly reduced, and its boundaries are likely to be redrawn. Chernobyl tourism is growing, and there are even plans to use redundant land for solar farms. The drone's radiation maps will ensure none of these activities run into trouble.
The BBC's Jonathan Amos reporting. Te Papa's newest $12 million exhibition, Te Taio, has opened its doors for a sneak preview ahead of Saturday's launch. A group of schoolchildren were lucky enough to get a first glimpse and play with the interactive displays. The exhibition team, from scientists to developers, say they are humbled and moved to see the exhibition come to life. Our reporter, Mediana Johnson, went with our visual journalist, Anna Tovey, to take a look.
It has been 3 years in the making, capturing thousands of years of history. Te Taio brings together Matauranga Māori and science in a 4-part exploration of New Zealand's environment. Excited children were clamouring to play with the Modi activator, where they touch a carved wooden plinth to bring a giant projection of a landscape to life in front of them. It's part of Te Ika Whenua Unique New Zealand, which showcases our diverse wildlife, both extinct and present. Lead science curator Leon Perry says there are about 690 species on one display wall.
It might look like a little bit of wallpaper on the back, but to get everything in its right place was a big effort by many people here at Te Papa. What the wall is representing is everything that is, everything behind us is only found here in Aotearoa.
In the volcano area of the Ruomoko Active Land exhibition, another giant projection plays an animation of how Lake Taupo was formed 25,500 years ago. Experienced developer Ralph Upton says there's been a positive response.
People have been pretty drawn in by it, I think. We've had people who've looked at it and go, what's that footage from? How did you get that footage? And like, it's not footage, it's a beautiful work done by some of our external collaborators.
At the centre is Te Kohanga nest, woven from recycled materials, which houses the moa egg, discovered at the Wairo Bar in 1939. The egg is fractured but almost fully intact and dates back to around 1300 AD and is surrounded by birds who are extinct, endangered or flourishing. Content creator Frith Williams says it is the centrepiece of the show and a moment of reflection.
That said, there are other really key moments like the Modi activator that introduces you to the concept of Modi and working together to support the life force in all living things. So I'd say the Modi activator and this moment here where we're asked to think about the impact that we've had are really key, yeah.
The final installation, Ngā Kaitiaki Guardians, examines the environmental challenges ahead of us and what a CO2-free future might look like. The whole exhibition is fully bilingual and is the first permanent exhibition in Te Papa to be in both Te Reo Māori and English. And it has more IT and interactive parts than in the entire museum. But some of the old favourites are back, like the Earthquake House and Colossal Squid. So, what did our resident reviewers from Mount Cook School think was the best part?
I really like making the tsunami, and you've got to move it, and we learned that if you wait for it to be really still and then do a big pull or push, then it's like a bigger wave. Well, my favourite part was the squid, because the squid is actually real, and I thought it was fake at the start until one of the ladies told me that it was real and that it's a she. The Earthquake House, because it's always a surprise when it shakes. My favourite thing was the Earthquake House too.
Yeah, why was that?
Because, you know, when it shakes, you can go underneath the table like it's like a real earthquake.
Those eager to see it for themselves will be able to do so when Te Taio opens on Saturday. For Checkpoint, ko Mediana Johnson tēnei.
But if you'd like a sneak peek before Saturday and you were just listening to that, go online and Mediana and Anna's piece will be there. You can have a look at it. It'll be Facebook page or our website. Got just a little bit of time for some of your feedback here on Taranaki transitioning away from oil and gas exploration. Neil says South Taranaki rubbish is trucked hundreds of kilometres to the central North Island, claiming the title of energy hub when they waste so much is a joke. And in relation to the police not charging Thompson and Clark over eavesdropping on a group of Quake claimants, this texter says that Thompson and Clark trust the government or the police. I don't think so. And just a reminder, if you were currently in commuter hell in Auckland on the Southern Motorway, avoid the area near the Market Road overbridge. There has been a crash earlier this evening there between a truck and a motorcycle, a serious crash. The motorcyclist has serious injuries, has been transported to hospital. So State Highway 16 might be an option, and State Highway 20. So State Highway 20, State Highway 16 might be your options there to avoid that area. Again, the southbound lanes on the Southern Motorway near Market Road. Stay away.
RNZ News at 6. Ngā mihi nui ko Susana Leata with DNA. The chair of the Taranaki Mayoral Forum says news of a clean energy centre for the province is a step in the right direction as it transitions away from oil and gas. The Prime Minister announced the establishment of the centre at New Plymouth's Just Transition Summit today. Neil Holdham, who's the city's mayor, has previously described the government's refusal to issue new offshore oil and gas exploration permits as a kick in the guts for Taranaki. Today, however, he called the National New Energy Development Centre a positive move.
It's a really good start, and it's really good to hear the Prime Minister talking about building a partnership and wanting to, support us as we look to maintain the standard of living of the people that live here.
Neil Holdham says 30 years of hard work lies ahead if Just Transition is to become a reality. The SAS soldier who died in a joint training exercise between the Defence Force and the US military in South Auckland has been described as an outstanding soldier and a top bloke. 36-year-old Lance Corporal Nicholas Kahotea died after being taken by helicopter from Ardmore to Auckland City Hospital last night. It's the third death during a military exercise in this country this year. The joint exercise, which was due to run for 2 more weeks, has been suspended. The Chief of the Army, John Boswell, says Lance Corporal Kahotea was a consummate professional known for his dedication and reliability. The police are investigating the death on behalf of the coroner, and the Defence Force will also hold a court of inquiry. Renewed fighting between Gaza and Israel is said to be stretching Gaza's health system to the limit. The UN's humanitarian coordinator for the Palestinian territories is warning it could mean amputations for people with bullet wounds after being shot by Israeli troops. The BBC's Sebastian Usher reports.
Weekly Palestinian protests at the border between Gaza and Israel have resulted in hundreds of deaths and thousands of injuries. Israeli security forces have repeatedly opened fire to defend the border against what Israel sees as a potential armed incursion. The casualties have pushed Gaza's health system to the limit. The problem has been exacerbated by cuts in international funds to UN aid agencies providing healthcare. Now, Jamie McGoldrick, the UN humanitarian coordinator for the Palestinian territories, has warned that inability to provide complex surgery and rehabilitation could lead to almost 2,000 amputations.
Sebastian Usher reporting. Electricity in Britain has now been generated for a full week without the use of energy from coal-burning power stations. It's the first time that's happened since the Industrial Revolution of the 19th century. Spokesperson for the National Grid is predicting the coal-free generation of power will become the new normal as more renewable energy becomes available. Coal now accounts for less than 10% of Britain's power output, and the government plans to phase out the country's last coal-fired power plants by 2025. The aim is to have Britain's electricity system producing zero carbon emissions by then. Property analysts doubt lower interest rates will make a huge difference to the housing market. Yesterday's cut in the official cash rate has prompted Westpac, ANZ and Kiwibank to announce slight cuts to their lending and deposit rates. Charlie Drever reports.
CoreLogic senior property economist Kelvin Davidson says property prices are still rising, albeit slowly, so the official cash rate drop might keep the upward swing going a bit longer and provide more confidence in the Auckland market. He says mortgage rates are already low, so it's not going to make a big difference, and they are unlikely to drop much further. The spokesperson for the First Home Buyers Club, Leslie Harris, says debt levels and the cost of living are preventing many people from getting a loan in the first place, so the lower mortgage rates will have little effect on them. Ko Charlie Drever, TNA.
The defence for a former Auckland teacher charged with indecently touching boys says every complainant has question marks around their evidence. Both the prosecution and defence have made their final arguments in the High Court trial of 55-year-old Benjamin Swan, who denies 10 charges of committing indecent acts on a young person. His lawyer, Sam Wimsett, said today that one of the boys' claims not only contradicted other evidence given, but also his own.
He actively lied, and then he doubled down on that lie when the first lie was gently pointed out to him. The defence says it's not a lie you can ignore. It's a lie to fit a deceitful narrative.
Lawyer Sam Wimsett. The Ferns sculpture that hangs over Wellington Civic Square is to be removed temporarily because of safety concerns. The large orb was only put back in the middle of last year after being pulled down 3 years earlier for restoration. The City Council says engineers want to bring it down as a safety measure to investigate stress on the wires used to keep it up. Concerns were first raised in a routine inspection in December, and the connections have been monitored since. It's expected Neil Dawson's sculpture will be down for 2 months. Auckland commuters are being asked to avoid a section of the southern motorway because of a serious crash between a truck and a motorcycle on the southbound lanes near Market Road overbridge. The police say the motorcyclist has been seriously injured. The Transport Agency says drivers should prepare for long delays and consider using State Highway 16 and State Highway 20 if travelling south from the CBD. It's 6:05. The All Blacks loose forward Liam Squire is finally back from injury and set to play his first Super Rugby game of the season. He missed the start of the season with a hip injury, then a knee ligament injury ruled him out of another couple of months. Squire has been named on the bench for the Highlanders match against the Jaguars in Dunedin on Saturday. Fellow All Black Waisake Naholo was also expected to be back this week, having been out with a knee injury since early last month, but his return is now likely to be next week. Tonga is set to offer Israel Folau a spot in its national rugby side. Folau is waiting to find out what penalty will be imposed by Rugby Australia now that an independent panel has found him guilty of a high-level breach of his contract. His parents are Tongan, and former Wallabies and now Tonga coach Tautai Kefu says the 30-year-old could play in Europe if he's exiled from Australian rugby and then play for Tonga at the 2023 World Cup.
I think he would get a lot of satisfaction out of playing for Tonga. The rules state that he would have to sit out 3 years before he would be before he was allowed to qualify for us. So he could definitely be available for the next World Cup.
Tautai Kefu. New Zealand will have just one cyclist in this year's first Grand Tour, the Giro d'Italia, which starts this weekend. Jack Bauer will ride for the Australian Mitchelton Scott team, but George Bennett, who finished 8th last year, hasn't made the Dutch Lotto Jumbo team. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, Alison Balance checks out the Kea population of Arthur's Pass. They might be smart, but some of them lack road sense. And then there's the lead getting to the diet. We explore what happens to diet when death forces us to dine alone. And Patrick Phelps is back in China, speaking to us from the other side of the Great Firewall, which is a bit of a bummer because he can't get Wikipedia anymore. On Nights with me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Indira Stewart and First Up are back on air tomorrow morning at 5 a.m. before Corin Dan joins Susie Ferguson on Morning Report from 6. Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Northland to Wellington, including Taumaranui and Taihape. Rain developing this evening or overnight, briefly heavy, clearing tomorrow morning and fine spells increasing. For Coromandel, Bay of Plenty and Taupo, cloudy periods and isolated showers. Rain for a time tomorrow morning or early afternoon, then mainly fine. Gisborne to Wairarapa, scattered rain tonight or tomorrow morning. Nelson and Marlborough, scattered showers turning to rain this evening, brief heavy falls, clearing early tomorrow and becoming fine. Bulla and Westland, rain today with heavy falls, possible thunderstorms, fine spells, isolated showers tomorrow. Fiordland, cloudy periods and a few showers. Canterbury, Otago and Southland, high cloud with scattered rain, mostly in the west. Mainly fine tomorrow with areas of fog morning and night. Chatham Islands, often cloudy with showers tomorrow. It's 6:08. You're with RNZ National.
Thanks, Susanna. This is Checkpoint. I'm Lisa Owen. The government's taking a hammering over its flagship KiwiBuild policy after neither the Housing Minister or the PM would confirm outright whether the target of building 100,000 new homes in a decade still stands. National claims it's a broken election promise. While Checkpoint invited Phil Twyford on the programme to clarify the situation, he wasn't keen. So instead, here's KiwiBuild, the deconstruction.
This is the house that Jack built. This is the mom that laid the house that Jack built.
To be fair, Jack only had one house to build. Phil Twyford's task of delivering 100,000 over a decade is proving considerably tougher.
Let's build 100,000 homes. 100,000 affordable starter homes.
The Minister, though, initially maintained his conviction. Here's us talking in February last year.
Are you on a path to failure with this policy?
No.
But to stick with a housing analogy, KiwiBuild's undergone significant renovations since the election. In fact, National would argue it's been a total gut job. National's housing spokesperson Judith Collins was happy to talk to us today.
Now it looks like they're backing away from it with as many reverse gears as an Italian tank.
Labor's plan was to ramp up construction over time in order to hit its end goal of 100,000 houses. So here's the year-on-year targets. 1,000 homes before the 1st of July this year, rising to 5,000 houses the next year, 10,000 the year after that, and 12,000 each year until 2028. But those targets went into the skip with the outdated vanity in Bath in January.
It's been tougher than we expected to get the early numbers up.
You've got 1,000 built by July this year. That is the target, right? We're agreed on that?
Yeah, that is our declared and published target, yeah.
And are you going to meet it? Can you guarantee this morning that you will meet that target?
No, I can't guarantee that. I mean, I think it's going to be tough to meet that target, and we're really focused at the moment on doing everything we can to refine and improve what we're doing, the way that we're working.
Okay, hang on. So you're saying this morning you can't guarantee you're going to meet the target?
No, it's a target. We've always aimed to meet that target, and we're working flat out.
The government's working on a KiwiBuild reset, but according to its own KiwiBuild tracker, just 80 houses are finished so far. It isn't the first walkback. According to Labor's detailed pre-election policy, standalone KiwiBuild houses in Auckland were supposed to top out at $600,000. They didn't, with the cap promptly jumping an extra $50,000.
On KiwiBuild, why has the price gone up by $50,000 for an affordable home?
Look, in the time that we did the modelling for price points, which was 2 years ago, and that time building costs have risen by 5% and the cost of land has risen as well.
Reigniting the whole debate about whether KiwiBuild is actually affordable.
You've got, a graduate doctor and a marketing manager who are one of the new owners of the KiwiBuild homes. Are those the sorts of people that you were after to try to capture, if you like, with KiwiBuild?
The fact that young middle-class couples, people with good jobs, often two incomes, professional jobs, have been locked out of the housing market shows just how terrible the housing crisis has got. I know there's been some criticism that KiwiBuild is not targeted at low-income families. But look, let's be really practical about this. If you're a low-income family, it's just not practical for you to be able to take on a $300,000 or a $500,000 mortgage because you simply won't be able to service the payments.
At times, the Housing Minister has failed to nail his own policy, adding to confusion.
One bedroom, $550. Yeah, it's gone up slightly.
It hadn't on that occasion. The original policy says Labor will build 100,000 quality homes. Now, that includes buying off plans or underwriting developments and counting some houses already planned or underway prior to KiwiBuild.
It's now Kiwi subsidised. So he's subsidising the developers to build the houses that they can't sell at the prices that they want to sell them at, that it costs them to build.
The government's also quietly softened its stance on on making people pay back all the profits from selling a Kiwi-built house if they up sticks within 5 years, settling instead on returning 30% if you sell within 3 years.
The entire windfall gain would have been a bit draconian.
What started as a first home buyers scheme expanded to include others. In some cases, the buyer's ballot has gone by the wayside too. Cue more neighbourly clashes on the AM show.
We choose to build affordable houses.
Phil, this is going to be a cluster. But, hey, you go for it, mate.
Bringing us home to the here and now. Judith Collins again.
It's pretty clear that the Minister of Housing won't succeed, and the job of opposition is to hold a government to account. He can't possibly succeed. Right at the moment, I think that Phil Twyford would be better with something like associate commerce, where he's less likely to get into trouble.
Phil Twyford did, after all, bet the house on delivering KiwiBuild.
Seriously, are you going to do this?
Yeah, absolutely. Look,
do you stake your job on it?
Yes.
And that was Phil Twyford ending that piece. We have had a few of you get in touch tonight about our Māori Issues correspondent Lee Marama McLaughlin's pronunciation of the word whānau, or as she says it, wānau. And because we wanted to address your queries properly, we're asked her to explain in her own words, and these are the notes that she's given me. When Lee Marama speaks te reo Māori, she drops the H in WH words and pronounces it as though it was just a W. That's because she's from Wanganui, and that's their iwi dialect. So across the board, for words like whānau or whangarei, she'll say it like wānau or wangarei. It's partly why there has been so much controversy over adding the H to the town name of Whanganui. Local Māori never pronounced the H, which is why it was spelled without it originally, but that was just their dialect. The H is there, just not sounded out. So most reo speakers around the country will hear Lee Marama drop the H when she speaks Māori, and that will tell them that she is from the Wanganui River. So there you go. Hope we cleared that up for you. You may have noticed the Sunday sizzle-up of bacon has got a whole lot more expensive lately, with pork prices jumping 25%. As the RNZ Daily News podcast, The Detail, reveals, it's because African swine fever is decimating pig stocks in China. China's culled more than 200 million pigs so far because of the infection that's not harmful to humans. And as the world's biggest pork consumer looks to increase its imports of the meat by nearly 60% this year, it's causing a worldwide shortage. The Detail's associate producer, Kefaki Masalamani, spoke to David Baines from New Zealand Pork.
China is a huge player when it comes to pork production. They produce more pigs than anyone else in the world. In fact, they produce just under 50% of the total pigs in the world. But the interesting fact to go alongside that is the fact that they eat most of that themselves. They export very little. They're basically a net importer of product as well. So whilst they produce the most number of pigs, they also import pigs from other countries to make up the shortfall of demand.
This has global repercussions.
Very much so. Very much so. I mean, we're seeing an impact in New Zealand. Currently for New Zealand, domestically we produce only 40% of what we eat for pork. So that means we import 60% of consumption. And a lot of the countries who previously supplied New Zealand are now indicating that because of the strong demand from China, that the availability of product for New Zealand is reduced. And because of that, with normal supply-demand factors, the price is going up. So it's having an impact on both availability and also the price for New Zealand consumers. It's very hard to do anything to stop the spread of it. We've been monitoring the situation because, sadly, African swine fever has been around for quite some time, for at least 12 years that it's been monitored on a world basis. And when you look at a world map in terms of affected countries, when you do on a time-lapse look at it, you can just see the infected areas just growing every 3 months when you look at it. So China, when they officially declared that they were affected, it was 1 or 2 provinces. Now they're at a stage where pretty much all of the country is affected with African swine fever, and now their neighbours are being affected. Recently we've had Vietnam, Cambodia and Mongolia all declare that they've got African swine fever in their pig populations.
What's the solution here? Do they have to cull the pig population?
Well, as I said, there's no cure to it. There's no vaccine. All you can try and do is to, eradicate the populations that have been affected by it, then repopulate your farms with clean stock, and then put up biosecurity measures to keep the infection out. But it's really hard where you've got a disease like this, because it's extremely hardy. It can survive for considerable time on items like clothing and almost indefinitely in frozen meat. So if you've got pork that's been consumed and then you've got the scraps which are then refed to pigs, you can reinfect a pig population that way.
You said that China has been infected and a lot of the countries around it have been infected, but we're quite isolated.
Yeah, I mean, that's one big advantage we do have in New Zealand, living in an island. But we've got, because we're such a beautiful island, you've got people who want to come and visit us. So you've got the risk of product coming in with people as they come into New Zealand over our borders. Recently, pork products have been intercepted on products carried by passengers into Australia, Japan, Thailand, Taiwan and South Korea. So we suspect that our profile in terms of tourist visitors is very similar to Australia. And we just note with quite a degree of concern that the Australian Department of Agriculture and Water Resources had tested for product that had come into Australia, and they found 15% of food samples that they tested in January and February contained ASF, and that was up from 5% in the previous time they measured it. So the risk of product coming into our country through passenger traffic is extremely high. So we're very concerned about that.
And that is New Zealand Pork General Manager David Baines. The defence in the trial of a former teacher charged with indecently touching boys says some of their claims are lies to fit a deceitful narrative. Benjamin Christopher Missy Swan denies 10 charges of an indecent act on young persons, and the charges relate to 7 boys. Jordan Bond has followed the trial at the High Court in Auckland and filed this report.
Both the Crown and the defence made their final arguments to the jury today. The defence lawyer, Sam Wimsett, said Mr Swan had been a dedicated, responsible and respected schoolteacher for over 30 years. He said he now faced a nightmare, sexual misconduct allegations, which Mr Swan claimed is an attempt to sabotage him. Mr Wimsett addressed the jury directly.
If it's possible that Mr Swan is telling the truth, then that is not guilty, because that is reasonable doubt. Is it possible that Mr Swan is telling the truth? Of course it is. The defence says that the evidence supports his innocence, let alone it being a reasonable possibility.
A lot of the details of the case can't be reported, so the complainants aren't able to be identified. Mr Wimsett earlier said the boys' stories contain some elements of truth, but also half-truths and outright falsehoods, like all the best lies do. He said they don't stand up to scrutiny, and that one boy's evidence not only contradicted other complainants, but himself.
He actively lied, then he doubled down on that lie when the first lie was gently pointed out to him. The defence says it's not a lie you can ignore. It's a lie to fit a deceitful narrative.
In summing up the Crown's case, Prosecutor David Stevens said all 7 boys gave consistent accounts of the alleged offending. He said there is no suggestion they colluded, and it would be remarkable if the allegations were made up because they were all so similar.
It is not by chance that each of the 7 boys described a variation of the same conduct. That is not a coincidence. They each describe similar conduct because the defendant did similar things to each boy. The Crown says the touching happened.
Mr Stevens gave a number of examples from the defendant's evidence, which he said were implausible. He said the touching was deliberate and indecent, and that it's a simple case.
If you accept the complainant's evidence about the touching beyond reasonable doubt, if you are sure that touching happened, that means you are sure of the defendant's guilt.
Mr Wimsett said the onus is on the prosecution to prove Mr Swan's guilt, rather than on the defence to disprove the allegations. He said Mr Swan's denials cannot be ruled out, and that whether he's telling the truth is at the very least a reasonable possibility.
There are question marks about each of the complainants, there are implausibilities, there are lies, and when you put all those things together, I say on behalf of Mr. Swan that the proper outcome is one of not guilty.
The judge, Justice Duffy, will sum up the case tomorrow morning before the jury retires to decide the verdict. Atuiti Koti Matua for Checkpoint, Court Jordan Bond, Aho.
The former president of Nauru, Sprent Dabwedo, has died from cancer at the age of 46. He oversaw the reopening of Australia's refugee detention centres on Nauru, but spent his final years fighting as one of the so-called Nauru 19 protesters who came under attack from the current government. Jamie Tahana reports.
A former professional weightlifter, Sprent Dabwedo entered politics and became the president of Nauru, the world's smallest republic, with a population of just 11,000 in 2011. A year later, he agreed with Australia's then Prime Minister, Julia Gillard, to reopen an asylum seeker detention centre in the impoverished country. Hundreds of refugees, including children, languished for years in conditions described by the United Nations as inhumane. In his dying days, Mr. Dabwedo told Australia's SBS he regretted the decision, saying it turned the country upside down.
The arrangement I had, I thought I was helping. But it's been changed into not much of a help. It became from a helping hand to a closed fist, and that's a big regret.
Sprent Dabwedo's final days were consumed by a battle with the current government of President Baron Wanga, a battle which drained him both financially and personally. Mr. Dabwedo was one of the Nauru 19 group of opposition figures who've been hauled through the courts after a crackdown on anti-government protests in 2015. The protest was in response to the banning of 3 MPs from Parliament after they criticised Mr. Wanga's government in the foreign media, including in interviews with RNZ Pacific. During the drawn-out court process, the government confiscated their passports and blocked their travel, even when Mr. Dabwedo needed urgent medical treatment in Australia. Last year, a judge described the Nauru government's actions as a shameful affront to the rule of law. A close friend and fellow Nauru 19 member, Matthew Batsua, says Mr. Dabwedo stood strong despite the pressure.
We believe that the government has a lot to answer for. The way they treated Sprent. It's an extension of the way they've been treating members of the Nauru 19 for the last 4 years, blacklisting us from getting jobs, preventing us from travelling, cancelling our passports. And this kind of treatment was extended to Sprent all throughout the last 4 years.
Earlier this year, Mr. Dabwedo sought asylum in Australia, claiming Mr. Wanga's government had gone out of its way again to prevent him from accessing specialist cancer care. Matthew Batsua says the government has blood on its hands.
The Ministry for Health just took their good old time, and in the end, Sprent wasted about 4 or 5 months here in Nauru while the cancer grew in his throat. And by the time he got to Australia and in front of an oncologist, it was too late.
The government has rejected that claim. Sprent Dabwedo is survived by his wife, Lucinda, who he married in a ceremony shortly before his death. For Checkpoint, Jamie Tahana.
Aucklanders have drawn a line in the sand when it comes to the price of avocados, saying $12.50 is too much. The Remuera greengrocer Jack Lum & Co had to cut prices because people just wouldn't pay, but he's still charging $11 an avocado, and he's not the only one asking a premium. Brooke Jenner reports.
Jack Lum & Co.'s avocados are no ordinary specimens. They're all about 13 centimetres long, roughly the length of a hand, and are ready to eat. But Jack Lum says even that's not enough to entice people to buy them for $12.50, and he's dropped the price to $10.99.
Yeah, we did sell, but not a lot. Not as much as, probably sold half as what I used to sell. So this is no good. I've got to bring it down again. Doesn't matter if I don't make any money, it doesn't matter. It's not about making money, it's selling your product, otherwise you have more waste, and try to keep the customers happy.
Mr. Lum, who's been in business for 49 years, says not many retailers stock avocados at this time of year because they're so expensive to buy from growers. He says the profit from each avocado in the off-season is minimal at best.
The customers don't know you do not sell the whole crate of avocados because there'll be some wastage, so you lose 20%. When the customers come in, they'll play with it, put their finger on it, and then it's got to be discounted. So that's where your bottom line is gone. So you're in minus straight away.
One loyal customer, Jason, travels from Westmere for the high-quality avocados at Mr Lum's store.
The quality is extraordinary. Of course, $10.99 is expensive, but for this price, it'll be perfect. If there's ever a problem, you can always bring them back and they'll exchange them.
For Grace Riley, the price is too high.
It's a bit of a waste of money just for one single avocado. It's a lot of money, but I mean, they're one of my favourite fruits / vegetables, so I don't know, I don't really have $10 to spend on an avocado.
The chief executive of NZ Avocado, Jen Schooler, says a price hike isn't uncommon at this time of year, when demand is bigger than supply.
We are hearing about the price of avocados, and I think we have to be realistic. It is we're a seasonal fruit, and we are in the low period. Like, we have a couple of months between one season and the next, which is April, May.
She says the past season brought some challenges for growers.
Last season we had a really early maturity, so the season was 5 or 6 weeks earlier than normal. We had a good export season, and of course the demand in New Zealand has been increasing significantly.
Ms Schooler says avocado lovers will be happy to hear the new season starts in June. And the industry has 1,000 hectares of new planting on top of nearly 4,000 hectares of trees already producing fruit. She says that will mean avocados on the shelves and more in the seasons to come. I tamaki makoro o te hōtaka o te ahi ahi nei, ko Brooke Jenner tēnei.
And that's Checkpoint for this evening. We'll catch you again tomorrow.
RNZ National with Indira Stewart setting up your news day on First Up from 5 a.m. again tomorrow morning before Corin Dan joins Susie Ferguson on Morning Report from 6. It's 6:30. Here are the headlines. A joint training exercise between the Defence Force and the US military in South Auckland has been suspended after the death of an SAS soldier, Lance Corporal Nicholas Kahutia. 3 government ministers and a Labour MP were gifted rugby union and league tickets by the controversial Chinese telecom company Huawei over the last year. The Labour MP, Kitty Allen, whose brother is charged with killing his partner, says her whānau has struggled with drugs and violence. And the Housing Minister, Phil Twyford, says he has no intention of resigning after calls from the National Party for him to step down because he's failed to deliver on KiwiBuild. Those are the headlines. Our next news will be at 7.